In this video, I plan to take you through all of my thought process over the last 3 weeks. I've been working super hard in that time to get a viewable and buildable model in Studio to show you guys by the end of this video. So press that subscribe button and plan to stick around because this is going to be a long series.
Just a cool youth pastor, or you got your suit? Good.
Now, like I said in the previous episode, I have been obsessed with No Way Home lately. It's just come onto digital download, and that's great because it means I can watch everything in Ultra HD. Not only can we look at things like the cures, but we can also take a look at things like the scaffolding.
We're trying to build a minifig scale Statue of Liberty here, and I don't want to get something like the scaffolding wrong, especially because it's going to be a lot of pieces to change if we end up buying something that turns out to be wrong or doesn't work structurally.
That's why it's really important to be building things digitally first, especially when you're working at this kind of a scale.
And I'm going to quickly answer this question because everybody will ask me in the comments section. I use Studio. Studio or stud.io,
I at least find is the best for building Lego. Now, when you're trying to make minifigures or something along those lines, you tend to turn your head more towards MoCBricks, but in terms of building sets themselves, stick with Studio. And although this video series isn't sponsored in any way by Studio, I'm going to be singing its praises throughout this episode and probably all of the other episodes to come. Studio, sponsor us. A few of you are going to say, why am I building digitally when I could just build physically and save a bunch of time? Now, some people I know like to build physically, and power to them, but I just can't justify building physically straight out of the gate with this one, mainly because of the piece count and sheer size. Most of this build needs to be tested, and the best way to do that is digitally. Even think to the scaffolding. I would have to order so many parts, and if one thing was wrong about them, then that's a load of parts and money wasted.
And considering that money is a big thing on this series, I don't want to waste any of it. So building things digitally is definitely the way to go. If you didn't end up seeing last week's video, we ended up making a blueprint. All it really does is indicate the look of the final set and kind of gives a rough gauge of scale. But the good thing about digitally building the set is that we're going to have a digital representation of the set before we have a physical one. So we can test everything that we need virtually before we do it physically.
And I think we're going to start off with something that you guys definitely want to see. Yeah, we're talking about the statue.
Now, last week we discovered that building the statue as a minifigure is going to work way better than building the statue as if it was shaped like a person. This should hopefully save in piece count, as minifigures tend to be a bit shorter and wider rather than thinner and taller. But that really got me thinking about how I was going to build this thing. I mean, the Statue of Liberty is not a small statue, but there's a lot of reference material and things all over Google that should help us work out exactly how tall this statue needs to be. And I thought, why not call one of the best mathematicians that I know to help me figure this out? Now, with all that math done, I want to explain a little bit of our findings.
And I want to start out by saying minifig scale is subjective. I mean, really subjective. Some people like to work at 145, some people like to work at 132, some people like to just work at any scale they want and figure, hey, it's close enough.
And a clear example of this is something like the Speed Champions versus modular sets. Now, the reason I bring these up is because most of the cars from the modular line to fit on their road plates are 6 wide. But now consider something like Speed Champions that work in 8 wide. Both sets are made by Lego, but both of them, if you ask many people from the Lego community, are still considered minifig scale.
Then you bring up the term exact minifig scale, then riots happen, sets get thrown off of roofs, and houses burn down. The point is, minifig scale can be subjective, and in my opinion the 6 wide cars do a way better job at fitting in minifig scale wise.
Hence why all of my collection stays a 6 wide, and with the wider cars then they move up to 8.
You guys should let me know in the comment section whether you want to see videos on these guys.
We actually talk about this a lot on the Cali Brick Click, which if you didn't know is a podcast that I featured in about 2 weeks ago. If you guys want to go and check that out, you can. I'll leave it in the description below. We talk a little bit about minifig scale and what it's like being a YouTuber. It's an interesting podcast and I'd check it out if I were you.
Well, what does that have to do with the Statue of Liberty?
Well, if we consider a minifigure to be rough average human height, which is around 5.6 to 5.7 feet, and then stacked all of these minifigures on top of each other, from the pedestal to the tip of the torch, we would need 53.5 minifigures for it to be quote-unquote perfect minifig scale. To put that into perspective, 53.5 normal minifigures stacked on top of each other is 7 feet tall, which is way taller than me, the tallest guy that I know, and happens to be almost the exact height as Shaquille O'Neal. But as 7 feet tall would frankly be ridiculous in my eyes, not only would it be a lot more pieces and probably need some form of internal structure, I would also like to eat for this year. And I think making something that big will save for another series.
So how are we going to fix this issue? Well, for those of you who are keen observers, you would notice that I never drew in the pedestal in the first place. And although the pedestal was great for working out the math of all this, we also know that the pedestal takes up about half the amount of the total height of the Statue of Liberty.
And for the argument of simplicity and looking nice in a title, I've rounded the number down from 53.5 just down to 50. And if we half this number to get rid of the pedestal, means that our Statue of Liberty will be 25 minifigures tall or 3.2 feet. This is the closest I can honestly get it to minifig scale, without it being a really cumbersome build. Honestly, I think the build is going to be huge, and like I said in part 1, I'm going to try and make it so there's no non-Lego internal structure.
So it's been 2 weeks since the last clip, and everything I've tried in studio so far has just been terrible.
This is honestly the best thing I have to show for my 2 weeks of work, and even if I had continued building this to the point where I had a minifig head, the structure is just not strong at all, and I don't believe it would be the correct size either. I need to come up with a new plan, and that got me thinking about Legoland models. The way that they're built layer by layer is not what you'd traditionally do as a Lego set, but honestly might be the best play for this kind of Statue of Liberty. And thanks to some advice I got from PLC, who knows Studio a lot better than I do, he managed to get me set up on Studio to generate one of these models. All I had to do was basically type in how tall I wanted the model, and typing in the measurements we had earlier, I had this. Now, as this is just generated, it doesn't have any of the printing details or any brick built details, but if I'm honest, I don't really think it needs them. This model gives me the general shape, and it gives me a part list of exactly how many parts I need. This statue alone is 13,000 plus pieces, and it may not look like it, but I've actually spent a good 10 hours or so on this model just refining all of the inside. Now, I don't think we'll have a full-on interior, but it is mostly hollow in there, so we'll see if we've got time for that later on down the line. And again, I don't know if you can tell, but this statue is going to be huge. This statue here is just over 25 minifigures tall, and you can see from the renderings just how tall this is going to be. I'm very happy with the Statue of Liberty model, and feel confident enough to where if we had all the pieces, this could be built and stand up just with a little bit of help from the scaffolding underneath the torch and the big plate.
But obviously, you guys know that I can't start building this until I have all those pieces. You can see that I've got a lot of pieces to go through here, and although I've put in a considerable amount of my own money and the money that has already been donated to this series so far, we need a lot more before we can even think about attempting to start building this thing.
So if you can spare £5, the donation link is literally in the description below, first line. Consider donating to this project to get this series out faster. I promise you, you won't regret it, and I'm just trying to get out as much content on this series for you guys as possible. All of the instructions that currently sell on my website are also going towards this project, so if you feel like you want to build something, whether it be Marvel, Harry Potter, or even sometimes Star Wars related, head over to TommyCBricks.com and take a look at all of our instructions. For those of you who bought the Hogwarts Express, the carriage is now out. If you guys want the carriage to go alongside your Hogwarts Express, it's ready and available, and for those of you who waited for both, there is a combo that you can also buy. It's ridiculous to think that this series is now fully underway, and I hear you guys crying out in the comments of where this series has been for the last 3 weeks. Like I say, with a project of this scale, I can't just drop them every week. There's never been a better time to subscribe to this channel, as next time we'll be discussing some colours, some minifigures, which I know you guys are super excited for, and a bit of the Green Goblin versus Spidey fight on the shield. I hope to be building something in the next coming weeks, and hell, this series isn't going to be cheap, so maybe checking out episode 1 if you haven't seen it, or just again if you have, or maybe looking at just some of the content in general across the channel will appease you between episodes.